The woman stretched a hammock between two trees in my garden. That's right. Without asking, without warning, she just arrived, tied it up and threw herself in. Some people don't know the difference between being a neighbor and owning the street. I'm not talking about the person who lends sugar or lets you know that the mail has come. I'm talking about those who walk around with the attitude of someone who thinks the neighborhood is an extension of their own backyard, or worse, their own will. The woman who lived 2 houses down from me seemed to have been born with her self-esteem stuffed into a megaphone. She was always involved in something, regulating the height of other people's weeds, timing the noise of the vacuum cleaner, noting who left their garbage out on time. If there were a trophy for the neighbor who watches her dog breathe, she'd already have a shelf full. But she outdid herself when she decided to innovate the abuse. One day, I went out to buy dog food, came back and saw a hammock stretched between 2 trees in my yard. Yes, you read that right. Between my trees, as if it were a public park, and it had been given a concession by the town hall. There was no note, no message, no cute little note, just the hammock and the scowl in the air. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe some neighbor had the crazy idea of doing a test, measuring shade, whatever. I walked around, checked to see if there was another support in another tree. Nothing. Everything pointed to it. The next day, things got worse, because not only was the net still there, but she was lying down, wearing a headset, drinking a green smoothie, and making Instagram stories with the caption, "Moment of connection with nature." My blood boiled in such a way that I had to walk around the block before deciding what to do. Not only had she used my space without permission, but she was promoting herself as if it were a spiritual achievement. I went back, approached her, and tried to remain civil. "Is this your network?" I asked as calmly as I could manage. She took out one of her headphones, smiled like someone handing out a pizzeria flyer, and replied, "Yes, I put it up yesterday. Your trees are so beautiful. I didn't think you'd mind. It looks so much nicer with a hammock, don't you think?" What did I think? That it was a blatant invasion disguised as a compliment. I took a deep breath and said that, yes, I did care. That those trees had been there for years. That I looked after them, pruned them, watered them. That they belonged on my land. And that no one had the right to put anything there without permission. She smiled again, a smile that dripped with debauchery. But I just wanted to make better use of the greenery. I'm not hurting anyone, I'm just using what nature has already given us. That sentence went straight onto the list of the worst I've ever heard. Because she wasn't just disrespecting my space. She was trying to make a territorial invasion look good for the planet. A kind of garden colonialism, if you like. I went back into the house snorting. I spent the rest of the afternoon looking out of the window, watching her swing in that hammock as if she'd bought the trees at an auction. She stayed there for hours. She took more photos, talked on the phone, and even sang a little acoustic song. Meanwhile, the anger was cooking away inside me unhurriedly. And then came the worst. In the evening, I found 2 neighbors commenting that she was enhancing the look of the street, that the yard now looked like a magazine cover. In other words, not only had she taken up my space, but she was also gaining image points as a result. I kept quiet, but my mind was already calculating. The next day, she put cushions in the hammock. Yes, cushions, printed ones. One of them had gratitude written on it. I swear, the hammock was now themed. That's when I decided. I wasn't going to rip the hammock down. I wasn't going to shout or call the police or the HOA. No direct confrontation. People like that don't learn through argument. They learn by being scared. I was going to give back on the same level. Creative, discreet, and completely within the law. All I needed were some thorns, a little time, and a well-placed message. And the best part? She would never relax the same way again. I started the plan on the quiet. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't drop any hints. I didn't post anything. I just started collecting what I needed. One sunny Saturday, I went to the garden store in the neighboring town and bought a packet of those thick sisal cords with a firm fiber. On the outside, it looked harmless. On the inside, a perfect texture for leaving marks. An invisible friction that only shows its strength after 3 minutes of direct contact with the skin. It wasn't enough. I returned home, went into the storage room, and found a box of accessories from an old project. Those flexible plastic thorns that are used in wall protection. They're discreet, thin, but hard enough to sting the skin. I did a test on my own arm. I rubbed it in slowly. The result? Immediate redness. Great. Exactly what I needed. I went to the garage, prepared the tools, and in the evening, when the lights in her house went out, I took the first step. I carefully took down the net. No tearing or throwing it away. It was going back, only modified. I replaced the original ropes with the ones I'd bought, which already had the thorns sewn discreetly between the fibers. You couldn't even see them from a distance. Up close? Only if someone decided to analyze it like a criminal expert. And that, let's face it, she would never do. I reinstalled the hammock between the trees as calmly as I could, in exactly the same position. I even left her cushions in the same place. Nothing could look different. The secret was to keep up the act until the last second. Before I went home, I left the icing on the cake, a little wooden sign stuck in the ground, right next to the hammock, small, rustic, with the following phrase engraved in burnt letters: "Every occupation has its price." The next morning, I watched it all from the window. She appeared in the yard with a steaming cup of tea, sunglasses, and that look of someone who thinks she's at peace with the universe. She went straight to the hammock as if she were meeting an old friend again. He arranged the cushions, took off his sneakers, and lay down. His body sank into the ropes as usual. The smile came with it. Her cell phone went into her hand. She took a selfie. She posted it. And then it began. First, a slight itch on her arm. Nothing to worry about. She scratched once. Then again. She changed position. I could tell it wasn't anything alarming. Not yet. Then the discomfort increased. She rubbed the back of her thigh harder against the net. She shifted her leg sideways. She straightened her hip. She began to squirm as if trying to find a better position. His face lost its serene look. A frown appeared. Her hands began to make nervous little movements. 2 minutes later, she jumped out of the net. Literally. She stood up as if she had sat on a burning anthill. She walked away quickly, ran her hands over her legs and arms, and entered the house without looking back. He even left his tea on the floor. At lunchtime, he showed up again, but this time with a spray bottle in his hand, probably anti-allergic. He went straight to the hammock, looked at the structure, ran his finger along it, smelled the ropes. The look on his face was one of doubt. The sign caught her eye. She read it, but remained motionless for a few seconds. Then she tore it off and threw it in a corner of the garden. That day, she didn't lie down. She just stood there, looking at it as if she were trying to solve a puzzle. The next day, he returned. He repeated the ritual, this time with a folded bath towel. He stretched it over the hammock, sat down slowly, like someone testing the water with their toe, before diving in. 5 minutes later, he came out scratching himself again. His neck was red. Her back was red. She disappeared for 3 days. When she came back, she ripped everything off. She arrived with scissors, rubber gloves, and a black garbage bag. She angrily removed the hammock, almost tearing the fabric. She unceremoniously threw the cushions away. The ropes, she cut into pieces and stuffed into the bag, as if she were destroying evidence of a crime. I just watched, with a coffee in my hand and a clear conscience. But the best? It was yet to come. 2 days later, I overheard a conversation at the gate. She was talking to a neighbor. Her arms were crossed, and she looked like she was trying to hide her defeat. I think I touched some toxic plant. I had a terrible reaction. I have a lot of bruises. I had to take an injection to avoid infection. The neighbor made a face of forced disgust and let out a, "Wow, really? What a thing, huh?" The woman tried to laugh it off as if it were a funny story, but I could tell she didn't find it funny at all. Neither did she, nor the bandaged arm she was trying to hide with a long-sleeved blouse in the 30-degree heat. And that's when she stopped talking about making better use of the green. Now she just rushes through the gate without looking at the yard. She doesn't even comment on the trees anymore. The sign? I went back and put it up again. But now, with an update, Learning Zone. Entry at your own risk. Over the next few weeks, the yard became a silent tourist spot. It was no longer just a patch of grass with 2 trees. It was the stage where the woman's ego melted under its own weight. The sign I left there, Learning Zone, entry at your own risk, began to attract attention. Some people thought it was a joke. Others said it was a metaphor for life. But the most attentive, the neighbors who live with their heads outside the curtain, like a turtle on a balcony, knew what had happened, and they started spreading the word. Not directly, of course. That would be very civilized. Good gossip is the kind that trickles down from street corners. A neighbor posted a screenshot of an old photo of herself on the web, with the caption, "Times of Innocence." Another sent an adhesive sticker with a tree emoji. All subtle, but everyone understood. The woman? She pretended nothing was happening. She walked as if she was the same as before, only now she avoided the garden. When he had to pass by, he looked as if he'd forgotten something and left in a hurry. He didn't even look at the trees. They had become a forest trauma, apparently. But the biggest embarrassment was yet to come. On Saturday, there was the neighborhood community fair, that organized mess where people sell cakes, plant seedlings, and fight over the price of a kilo of pastel. The HOA set up a tent in the central square, and of course, she was there, not as a victim, but as a volunteer, trying to recover the prestige that flowed with the blood from her scratched leg. She was wearing the kind of clothes that scream, "I'm involved in the community." A floral button-down shirt, big sunglasses, and a forced smile at full volume. She did everything she could to strike up a conversation with passers-by, offering pamphlets on sustainable gardening rules and the conscious use of green areas. Then a child, she must have been about 7, pointed at her and shouted loudly, "That's the aunt who fell into the thorn net, Mom. The one with the sign." Time froze. It was as if the square had fallen silent for 3 seconds. Everyone turned their faces away at once, as if rehearsing. The child's mother tried to cover it up, but there was no time. The damage had already been done. She froze. Her smile was frozen on her face. Her hand, outstretched with the leaflet, was frozen in midair. What's worse, no one denied it. One gentleman even laughed. Another pretended to cough to hide his laughter. She collected the papers and walked away quickly, with hard steps, with her pride torn like the net she thought she had mastered. On Monday, she walked past my house with a cap pulled down to her ears. She was unrecognizable. No makeup, no haughty posture, no air of superiority. Just another resident trying to get through the neighborhood without being reminded of her defeat. But the neighborhood doesn't forget easily. The trees remained firm, and the sign was clearly visible. Some even took pictures of themselves, smiling next to it. It became a point of reference. A neighbor with a gardening blog posted a photo with the caption, "Learning from Thorns is also growth." It received 217 likes in the closed community group alone. One day a group of teenagers passed by, and one of them said, "Hey, this is the famous Justice Network, right?" Another replied, "Yes, they say that to this day it itches when it hears the sound of wind among the leaves." The woman even began to avoid the HOA's social gatherings. The important figure in the association became a shadow. She showed up when no one was around, sent notes instead of emails, avoided face-to-face meetings, and the reason was one. No one forgets the queen who fell from her cloth throne. The irony? No one had laid a finger on her. Nothing was forcibly removed. Everything that happened because she decided to ignore boundaries. And now, no matter how much she pretended that she was the victim of poisonous plants or the work of fate, the neighborhood had witnessed the entire fall. Time has passed, but the memory of the woman's embarrassment has not. No wind can carry away the kind of shame that spreads from mouth to mouth. disguised as an innocent comment. The network no longer existed, but the story became a neighborhood chronicle. It was told in different versions depending on the corner. On some, the Thorns turned into razors. In others, she rolled out of the hammock onto the lawn as if she had been shot by bees. Each version further fueled the folklore that grew up around the episode. The trees, poor things, which used to be just trees, became a symbol, a landmark of the limit that could not be crossed. Some people even said that the leaves now looked greener, more alive, as if they had celebrated the end of the abuse. It, on the other hand, withered away, day after day. Her attempts to restore her reputation became a source of derision. The letters she used to hand out on doorsteps with ecological tips for making the most of your yard stopped being read. HOA meetings began to take place without anyone asking her to attend. No one wanted to hear a lecture from someone who had become a walking joke. Rumors began to circulate that she wanted to move. At first, it seemed like balcony gossip, but then signs appeared. First, the discreet "for sale" in the corner of the front window. Then, a visit from realtors. And then, an official sign in the garden, with one of those colorful frames that say, "Great opportunity." But no one took the bait. The house didn't sell. Because, of course, nobody wants to live in a place where the whole neighborhood already knows you've been beaten by your own ego. Even more so with an engraved sign saying, "Learning Zone," fixed right in the middle of the yard. And no, I didn't take the sign down. She tried twice. She tore it off, broke one, threw it away. But I always put up another one, with better wood, with a firmer carving. Once I even wrote underneath, version 3.0, now more resistant to denial. Moving day arrived on a muggy, dull Monday, the kind that feels like a temporary reprieve from summer. She hired a discreet moving company. No truck with a name on it, just a white van, 2 quiet guys, and a well-rehearsed script. They placed the boxes slowly, quietly. They covered the mirrors. They piled up cushions, blankets, and kitchen utensils. What was striking was the number of pots. It looked like a plant store. Cacti, succulents, ferns, as if she was trying to take away what little connection with nature she still had left. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't say goodbye. The whole neighborhood noticed. Some watched from their windows. Others took that casual stroll down the street just to check. When the gate closed for the last time, there was no wave. There were no honking cars, just the sound of the gate's wheels squeaking for the last time. After that, the street breathed differently. The neighborhood gradually regained its peace. The trees were just trees again. The sign remained. Over time, it became something of a local legend. Children passed by and read it aloud. Visitors asked about the story, and each resident told it with a twinkle in their eye, like someone talking about a really good movie they watched live from their balcony. A new resident appeared, a quiet, soft-spoken, retired man. He planted daisies near the fence. One day, he called me, "This sign here, is it a story or a warning?" I smiled. "It's both." He laughed and said he would respect it. And he did. Today, I sometimes sit on the wooden chair in the yard and look at the spot where the hammock used to stand. Sometimes the wind shakes the branches and makes the leaves hit each other. It reminds me of the sound of fabric being pulled. The hammock is gone, the woman too, but the lesson remains. It's not about thorns. It's not about the net. It's about knowing that even the shadow needs permission. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.